president's back is up against the wall. The president's back is against the wall. The president feels like he's backed up against the wall.
His back is up against the wall.
With his back up against the wall, his back is up against the wall.
With his back against the wall,
back's up against the wall.
His back is against the wall. If his back was against the wall,
Let Mueller simply weapons of war.
Weapons of war.
weapons of war,
Weapons of war.
Weapons of war.
Weapons of war.
weapons of war,
Weapons of war.
Weapons of war.
Weapons of war.
Weapons of war. These weapons of war.
Weapons of war.
These weapons of war.
Weapons of war. Weapons of war.
The weapons of war.
weapons of war.
Weapons of war.
Weapons of war.
Getting weapons of war.
Weapons of war.
Weapons that are weapons of war. Weapons of war.
Weapons of war.
Weapons of war, these weapons of mass destruction, which is what...
That this is a manufactured crisis and a crisis that manufactured by the Trump administration.
This is a manufactured crisis, Bill.
How he manufactures crises like immigrants seeking legal refuge.
what the president is doing is manufacturing a crisis.
President Trump must stop holding the American people hostage, must stop manufacturing a crisis.
This president just used the backdrop of the Oval Office to manufacture a crisis.
So they've brought back manufacturing.
States, and we believe that the President of the United States is engaged in a cover-up.
And that there's a cover-up. And those are the leads us. It's starting to look more like a cover-up in that...
And its renewals that cherry picks information.
That very selectively cherry picks information to make one's case.
The memo is said to be the product of a cherry-picked intelligence.
We're not going to be cherry-picking this.
To cherry-pick this. That offer a few cherry-picked and misleading details.
What we have is a cherry-picked memo.
Facts that were put in the memo were cherry-picked. What was put out in the memo does, in fact, cherry-pick.
It was kind of cherry-picked.
Right. Cherry-picked information that we're looking at.
Just kind of cherry-picked certain details.
A few cherry-picked facts.
It really just cherry-picks.
A very selective cherry-picked reading of a very selective and cherry-picked memo, right?
It's a very cherry-picked memo, no?
Or do his work.
Making sure that Robert Mueller can do his job.
Let him finish his work.
Bottom line, he concludes there was no collusion.
What a constitutional crisis looks like will open your eyes.
We are now in a constitutional crisis.
President Trump appears to be heading toward a constitutional crisis.
I saw this coming and mentioned the constitutional crisis.
We're hovering on a constitutional crisis. We're in a constitutional conflict that's careening toward a crisis.
Do you agree with Congressman Nadler, Chairman Nadler, that we're in a constitutional crisis?
We are.
But we're right. We're going to see the other side of that memo as well, probably.